So I've talked before about this concept of getting in the mud, which I use when I'm talking about when I'm trying to be really like self-reflective, identify some really deep, kind of inconvenient or uncomfortable truths about myself and how I think or why I take certain actions. The phrase, to do that, you kind of got to get into the mud and really figure it out. And I say get into the mud because the way I think about it, the way I experience it, I guess, is it's messy, it's uncomfortable, it's difficult. It's almost as if you're looking for that truth and it's buried, deep in the ground. But worse yet, it's mud. So as you're digging for it, it's just you're not really able to get to it, and it's just all around just not a good experience in many ways. And I think that's intentional. I think our mind in many ways is trying to protect us from getting to those things. So it takes a level of mental toughness and courage, frankly, to get in there. Because then often when you find the thing, it takes a lot to get there. It's super uncomfortable, and then it's only worse once you actually find it. And there's some hard truths you usually have to face. And it just makes me think, there's kind of this, I guess, a yin and a yang almost to a lot of what we talk about with thinking better. In that on the one hand, there's this very clean, almost beautiful, symmetrical logic that exists, the math that we always talk about. There's calculations happening and we always act in accordance with it, and there's a deep logic to it where if this is true, this can't be true, and it all pieces together very nicely and things fit. And that's one piece of it. But the other part of it is this part, the dirty work, the getting into the mud, the mental toughness, the humility, the courage, as we talked about, to really try and understand who you are and question your identity and not succumb to the fear and the defense mechanisms that our mind puts up to be able to get through those. And that's an interesting concept because I think without one or the other, you're in a tough spot, or at least you're not in the ideal spot. You could run all the math in the world. You could be the most sophisticated thinker. But if you don't really have the truth, if you don't really have the right inputs, it's all garbage in, garbage out, right? So you need to be able to do that work and get into the mud and figure those things out. But likewise, if you are a super honest and genuine, humble person who feels like they identify the truth about themselves, but doesn't really know how to think, doesn't know how to work with those truths and what you do with them and how you take the right actions to get towards your objective, again, not all that helpful. And it makes me think UFC, which I watch a lot of, MMA was on tonight, and it makes me think about, there's often types of fighters that you have, and there's the one type that's more the brawler, not really all that technical, typically not all that successful, but kind of just through sheer willpower and muscling through and toughness, typically will put on some good fights. And then, on the other end of that spectrum, you have the super technical, super flashy, really, really sharp guys whose techniques are perfect, and whether they be a kickboxer or whatever their background is, just really smooth, flowing, beautiful to watch, mixed martial arts. But either one of those, just at the extreme, really doesn't do it, right? When you pair those things together, when you marry those two things, the toughness, the sheer will and determination to win, with the skills, with the technique, that's when you have really the top flight, fighters. And you can take it to another sport, as I often do. Michael Jordan is a name that's often talked about, and I often think with him, and there's others like him, but that's what you saw. You saw the marrying of those two things. It's just a deep, technical understanding of the game, technique in terms of his shot and his, ball handling and his, ability to post up and all the different things you need to do well. He understood basketball. He was gifted, his ability to jump, all those things. Like, he had all of the obvious attributes to be a great basketball player. But then you add in that mental toughness and that, consistency and never really getting hurt or playing through pain and the willpower to say, I'm not going to allow this team to lose. you see the power of that with somebody like him when you compare those things together. And I think it's the perfect illustration of, as you're trying to think better, what you want to try and marry together and what the outcome, how powerful it can be if you can marry those two things. So again, get in the mud. I don't want that thought to be lost, or at least diminished or undervalued, because we could talk all day about the thinking aspect of it, and it's valuable. But getting into that mud, being willing to face some things about yourself that sometimes you know them already, but you just don't want to acknowledge them. Sometimes you don't know them. Being willing to do that is just a critical component of it. And I think it's important, as for me at least, I'll say, but I think it's hopefully applicable to others, when you are going through that process, when you are trying to think about an issue, maybe some deep character flaw you believe you have, and you're trying to understand why you have it, or you have some tough decision, or you have this strong view politically or whatever. If you don't feel that, right? If you don't feel that being in the mud, if you don't feel that uncomfortableness, if you don't feel the challenge and the difficulty and the battle almost going on in your mind to try and stop you from getting to it, it's a bit of an instrument that tells you maybe you're not there yet. If the topic matters, if it's an important thing that you're thinking about, you'll likely run into that. It's going to be complex. If it's emotionally charged, there's something underneath it. And it's your job to get into that mud, dig through it, and do your best to find it, or at least as close to it as you can. And it's, as the name or the phrase would suggest, it's no easy task, but an important one that we have to go after.